History textbooks are filled with pages describing various revolutions. Organized groups of people who fought with their lives to replace the existing ruling system with another. Many turned out to be failures, but occasionally one would result in a triumphant success. These uprisings tended to shape not only one country but several, their influence sometimes even crossing continents. Popular uprisings are as old as history. They occurred whenever democratic, oligarchic, and monarchic regimes alternated in assuming power, and such alternation of political power often came through violence. Yet not all political thinkers of the time believed that revolutions were a permanent aspect of politics. A revolution is not just a violent break with an established order, but also a social and political change rising from the people. And revolution does not belong exclusively to the past. It is a tumultuous and transformative event that attempts to change a nation, a region, or society, and in some cases, even the whole world. Revolutions vary in their motives and their aims. Some, like the American Revolution, seek to overthrow and replace the political order. Others, like the Russian and Chinese revolutions, also seek radical social and economic change. I have picked four of the biggest and most impactful revolutions in modern history. We will first dive into each revolution and then discuss some of the things all these revolutions have in common. Most revolutions are driven by people and groups inspired by hope, idealism, and dreams of a better society. These revolutionaries attempt to change or overthrow the old order while the old order strives to maintain its power. The outcomes are confrontation, conflict, disruption, and division, which can lead to war, violence, and human suffering. The people who start revolutions have determined the institutions currently in place in society have failed or no longer serve their intended purpose. Because the objective of revolutions is to upturn established order, the characteristics that define them reflect the circumstances of their birth. Revolutions are born when the social climate in a country changes and political system does not react in kind. People become discouraged by existing conditions, which alters their values and beliefs. Over the course of history, philosophers have held different views as to whether revolution is a natural occurrence in a changing society or whether it indicates social decay. The following four revolutions are particularly noteworthy for their long-lasting impact on the world. Through bloodshed came change, and whether it was for better or for worse, there is no denying the importance of such pivotal moments in our history. The French Revolution was a milestone episode in modern European history. It began in the year 1789 and ended in the late 1790s with the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte. All through that time, residents of France were leveling and restructuring their country's administrative landscape, uprooting centuries-old foundations such as sheer monarchy and the feudal system. The turmoil was caused due to an extensive discontent with the monarchy and the pitiable economic policies of King Louis XVI. The French Revolution played a critical role in shaping modern nations by showing its goals and at times disintegrated into a chaotic bloodbath. France's social and political structure was completely changed due to this revolution. It came to an end to French feudalism, monarchy, and took political power from the Catholic Church. It brought new ideas to Europe, including liberty and freedom for the commoner, as well as the abolishment of slavery and the rights of women. These new ideas continued to influence Europe and helped to shape many of Europe's modern-day governments. Before the French Revolution, the people of France were divided into three social groups, called estates. The first estate included the clergy, the second estate included the nobles, and the third estate included the rest. Most of the taxes were used to be paid by the third estate people, while the nobles lived lives of luxury and got all the high-ranking jobs. Many of the new political ideas and alliances of the French Revolution formed in political clubs. They were called the Jacobin Club, the Feuillians, the Cordeliers, and the Pantheon Club. Democratic rights and the right to liberty were the most important heritage of the French Revolution. This spread from France to the rest of the Europe during the 19th century, when feudal systems were abolished. Later, these ideas were adopted by Indian revolutionary strugglers like Tipu Sultan and Raja Rama Mohan Roy. Chinese Revolution. Ever since their conquest of China in the 17th century, most of the Manchu had lived in comparative idleness supposedly a standing army of occupation, but in reality inefficient pensionaries. All through the 19th century, the dynasty had been declining, and upon the death of the Empress Dowager Shishi in 1908, it lost its last able leader. In 1911, the Emperor Puyi was a child, and the regency was incompetent to guide the nation. But unsuccessful contest with foreign powers had shaken not only the dynasty but the entire machinery of the government. The chain of events immediately leading to where the revolution began when an agreement was signed on April 5, 1911 with the four-power group of foreign bankers for the construction of lines on the Hukong Railway in central China. On October 10th, in consequence of the uncovering of a plot in Hankou that had little or no connection with the Sichuan episode, a mutiny broke out among the troops in Wuchang, and this is regarded as the formal beginning of the revolution. The mutineers soon captured the Wuchang Mint and arsenal, and they were protests in the city against the Qing government. The regent, panic-stricken, granted the assembly's demand for the immediate adoption of a constitution and urged a former viceroy, Yuan Shikai, to come out of retirement and save the dynasty. In November, he was made premier. Had Yuan acted vigorously, he might have suppressed the uprising and so have delayed the inevitable. He dallied, however, and by the end of the year, 14 provinces had declared against the king leadership. In December, the Yuan agreed to an armistice and entered into negotiations with the Republicans. On February 12, 1912, the boy emperor was made to abdicate the throne in a proclamation that transferred the government to the people's representatives, declared that the constitution should thenceforth be publican, and gave Yuan Shikai full powers to organize a provisional government. A provisional constitution was promulgated in March 1912 by the Nanjing Parliament, and in April the government was transferred to Beijing. The republic, established with such startling rapidity and comparative ease, was destined in succeeding decades to witness the progressive collapse of national unity and orderly government. The revolution of 1911 was a critical moment in Chinese history because of how it paved the way for the Chinese Communist Revolution in 1949, an uprising that established the People's Republic of China under the rule of Mao Zedong. Russian Revolution. By the beginning of the 20th century, Russia was one of the most underdeveloped and impoverished countries in Europe. Struggling because of the state of their country, workers protested against the monarchy in 1905, which led to the Bloody Sunday Massacre and a failed uprising. World War I crippled the Russian economy and resulted in high debt tolls. Tsar Nicholas II left the country to command the army and inspire his troops, but he turned out to be an ineffective leader. Moreover, he left the country in the hands of his wife, a woman of German descent, unpopular among the population, who was under the influence of Grigori Rasputin, a Russian mystic and self-proclaimed prophet. During the February Revolution of 1917, protesters took to Petrograd, modern-day St. Petersburg, streets. This time, they were joined by a significant number of soldiers who had lost faith in their ruler. A few days after the new provisional government was formed, Tsar Nicholas II abdicated the throne, bringing an end to the Romanov dynasty and the imperial system. But this did not mark the end of Russia's revolutionary history. Made up of members from the bourgeoisie, the new government continued to support the war effort in the still ongoing World War I, which only worsened the country's economy. During the October Revolution of 1917, revolutionaries led by the leftist Bolshevik Party and their leader Vladimir Lenin stormed the Winter Palace, taking power from the provisional government in a clean coup d'etat. Lenin championed a new Soviet government ruled not by capitalists but by a collective of peasants, laborers and soldiers. Despite his efforts, the revolution was not widely embraced outside Petrograd by the remaining imperial loyalists. For 5 years, civil war consumed Russia, ultimately resulting in a victory for Lenin and the establishment of the Soviet Union. American Revolution. Tensions between the British and their 13 American colonies began to mount in 1765 with the introduction of the Stamp Act, a decree imposing unpopular taxes on the colonies as a means to pay off the expenses from the 7 Years' War with France. Pockets of violence broke out as protesters, resenting the new taxes, voiced their unhappiness. A notable act of rebellion happened in 1773 when a group of protesters known as the Sons of Liberty dumped 342 chests of tea into Boston Harbor to protest taxation of tea, an event that became known as the Boston Tea Party. In 1774, 12 delegates from the 13 colonies came together to discuss the situation, forming a Continental Congress which served as a governing body of the colonies in the transition to independence. At first, they did not openly demand independence, but they denounced taxation without representation within the British Parliament. War broke out in 1775 with the battles of Lexington and Concord when the King's forces were sent to confiscate American military weapons and supplies. On July 4th of the following year, the Continental Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence, an official proclamation rejecting the British monarchy, ultimately laying the groundwork for the formation of the United States of America. The violence continued for several years until George Washington's troops, alongside the French army, won a decisive victory over the British at the Battle of Yorktown in 1781. The conflict officially concluded 2 years later with the 1783 Treaty of Paris, in which the British abandoned all claims in the United States. Similarities in all four revolutions. Radical ideas. Several political revolutions during the early part of the long 19th century changed the Atlantic world and had radical effects on the rest of the world, effects that continue to be felt today. The American War of Independence and the French Revolution were all between 1775 and 1825. Why did these monumental shifts in power occur in such short period of time? What influenced people on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean and in both North and South America to all revolt against their ruler within a few short decades? Enlightened changes. The causes of these revolutions were connected through new intellectual and political ideas and economic issues. Monetary gains. But it wasn't all about the big new ideas. Changing systems of production and distribution were also among the causes of these political revolutions. For example, several wars were fought in the years before these revolutions that would have long-term effects. The end of an old regime. The growing population led to the growth of cities and towns. That caused inflation, making the goods and food that people needed much more expensive. The poor had to work harder and longer to survive as rents and costs continued to rise. Revolutionary roots. Each of these revolutions had its leaders and specific local challenges, but they were not isolated in their ideas or causes. Conclusion. Aristotle, for instance, argued that the most stable political system was neither a democracy, oligarchy, nor a monarchy, but a combination of the three. Aristotle's stable political system would have a large middle class. The middle class would be a hybrid class, which would take advantages of the wisdom and wealth of the oligarchy and monarchy, but also would consist of the greatest number of people, as was the case in a democracy. In other words, when property and power are widely distributed among individuals of a given society, there will be no good reason to ignite a revolution. Indeed, modern industrial democracies, which have a larger middle class, seem to be politically stable, and this evidence suggests that Aristotle's theory has stood the test of time. I hope you liked my lecture and found it informational.